All right, so we're back from our recess, and we have another speaker, presenter, good friend. When we first got together, getting to know each other, we didn't know that we would become really good friends with this family, and absolutely just love your family, your kids, your husband just has become a great friend. Miss Mrs. Annette Poole, expecting number 9, is that correct? Has experience in homeschooling through the different seasons and starting over, right? So anyway, she's awesome, funny, and just great to hang out with, and her family, Mrs. Annette Poole.
Is this on? It is on? Okay. Hi, guys. So you all have a little goodie bag, and in your goodie bag, this is called the XYZs of homeschooling. And so each one of those little things is going to represent one of my points that I'm going to talk about. So as you can tell, I'm used to working with kids, and it's good to have little reminders for kids like that. So let's see. Okay, it's funny because my first point is X, relax. You can do this, which I'm having to tell myself right now because it has literally been 20 years since I have had to speak in front of adults. So this is quite, yes, nerve-wracking for me, even though you are all my friends. Okay, so homeschooling, like has been already said, if you have a child or you homeschool parent, you have taught them so many things. You're already halfway there. I think Jennifer said that. You've been doing it. Who knows your child better than you? Who has more love for your child than you? Bigger interest in your child than you? So you've already been doing this, and I commend you, whether your child is going to private school, public school, homeschool full-time, homeschool for now until we figure out this whole thing that's kind of odd that I'm not sure what's going to happen in the next 6 months. I commend you because you're looking at your child and trying to make the best choice for your child and your family. So, good job, way to go. So the first little X is relax, which you have chill pills in your bag, so you can remember to relax. I started homeschooling. My daughter is 20, Sarah, who was on stage. She's our oldest, so I started homeschooling 20 years ago. When I first held her in my arms, and you know this, if you're a mom, you just all of a sudden feel this purpose in your life for this person that has been entrusted to you. And before that, I guess I did teach school a couple of years, had gone to college, all of that. But I didn't, and I loved my students, and I loved teaching, but I didn't feel the same passion for teaching those kids as I now felt for this little being that had been entrusted to me. And I realized that if I wanted her to be the kind of person that I wanted her to be, I was going to have to become the kind of person that I wanted her to be. So really it was the first time that I guess I kind of grew up. I kind of realized, if I want her to be a person who loves the Lord with all of her heart, if I want her to be a person who's able to minister to others, if I want her to be a person who loves others better than herself, I need to become that. And I wasn't, thinking about homeschooling at that point. I had come home from the public school just to be home with my baby, and I figured, when she gets old enough to go back to school, I'll go back. That's what you do, right? In fact, I can remember somebody asking me, would you ever homeschool? And I said, yeah, if God sends me a neon sign down from the sky, maybe I'll consider it. So we started out when she turned 4, and I had to make a decision about what I was going to do about putting her in school. I thought, well, have an elementary education degree that goes from pre-K to 8th grade, so surely I could teach her kindergarten? Maybe? And that's kind of how we started. I just couldn't see myself sending her to school, to the school environment. I kind of saw my little lamb being sent among wolves, actually. You just don't know what all they're getting when they go into the public school. Even if the teacher is wonderful, and there are many wonderful teachers out there, you still don't know what's influencing your child. So I kept her home the first year. That went okay. Kept her home the second year. I was like, well, I taught 3rd grade in public school. Other people entrusted their kids to me, so maybe I can do it. But really, literally, it just went year by year at first. I did not know 20 years later that I was going to be 44 years old and, still having homeschooled for all these years, and she would have graduated from homeschool. So I guess that's my second point, is why I realized that I needed to know my why. Why did I want to keep her home? Why was this important to me? And you have a little magnet in your bag, and it says, "You are my why." And of course, that is why we're doing this. Our kids are our why. And God's command is to us to teach and train our children as we lay down, as we stand up, as we go on our way. And what better way to do that than to keep them home with you? So I started researching, what is knowledge? What is wisdom? How do I get it? How do I impart it? What am I doing? And so Proverbs 1 verse 7 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Fools despise instruction and knowledge." And so what I decided to do was going to be how I was going to organize my school day. I was going to start my day with scripture. Because if I could impart to them the fear of the Lord, He was promising me that knowledge would follow, wisdom would follow. And I didn't have to know how I was going to teach them calculus or algebra or chemistry. All I had to do was follow what God was telling me to do, and that was to teach them the fear of the Lord. So that's how I decided to design my days. And my husband and I work shift work, and so our schedule is always crazy. Our schedule is always changing. Sometimes we start school at, it's never 8 in the morning, 9 or 9:30. Sometimes we start school at 2 in the afternoon. Sometimes we don't get to school on a day. But I just decided that that's how we're going to start. So we do some scripture reading, and I have an example over in the other room if anybody wants to come see it. I had them start doing, they're called Heart of Wisdom journals. And as we would read, I would just have them draw a picture of what we were reading. Or as they got older, they would have to, write a little, what did you learn today? Or for their handwriting, they could do, practice their handwriting with a short verse or whatever. And I just called them our Heart of Wisdom journals. And that was how we started our day. And so I know this sounds silly, but through that, they are learning writing, reading, history. Of course, they're learning the fear of the Lord. And I just decided that if we didn't get to anything else in the day, because, things come up, and sometimes you don't get to anything else during the day, that priority had been established and set, and through the years, it would work out in the long run. So that is our why. You have to know your own why. The other thing is, I realized that everyone is going to have gaps in their education. If you sent your child to the best school in the country, they're going to have gaps in their education. So my husband and I decided that we would rather our children have gaps in things that they can learn later in life, science, math, geography, whatever, than in a good biblical foundation and a good character foundation. And of course, what you're seeing now is that people would rather hire people who have good work ethic and good character because they can teach them what they need to know. So that was just something, I guess, that was placed in our hearts from the very beginning, that we didn't want our kids' gaps to as far as much as we could teach them. I mean, we all have faults, and we all sin, and of course we all struggle with that daily. But as far as we could do, we didn't want our kids' gaps to be in character and biblical foundation and the love of the Lord. We would rather their gaps be in things that, like math, because they learn that later, if that's something that they are wanting to go into and they need to. Let's see. Okay, so my Z is zoom in, zoom out, and of course that's the cute little, I don't know what those things are called. That, yes. And mostly that is just to remember to keep your perspective. We get so bogged down thinking, what curriculum? Is this the best curriculum? Oh my gosh, that curriculum costs so much. Or maybe you and your child have personality differences, or maybe maybe you haven't graduated from college and you're not confident that you would be able to educate your child to be able to get into college. And it's just keeping that perspective of homeschooling gives you the opportunity to know your child. It gives you the opportunity to learn along with your child. And it also gives you the opportunity to, I do this. I totally lost my train of thought. To go into what they are, like kind of like what the kids talked about, going to what they are interested in along with them. My weaknesses are math and science. And Sarah, I don't know how, I don't know where, and I don't know why, but she loves science, and that is her favorite subject, and she has now taught it to my younger kids. She's about to teach it in the extension classes that we're having here, and I would have never seen that coming. So don't let your own weaknesses cause you to be afraid of educating your children, because if there is one thing I've learned, it is that God will fill in the gaps. He has always provided what we have needed beyond what I could have imagined would have happened. And so you may have a child that you don't, is super interested in computers and you don't even know how to turn one on. But pray, trust God, and He will lead that child to a person who can help them or in a direction that can help them. So don't let your own fear of your own weaknesses hold you back from making the decision to homeschool. Oh, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the stereotypes, the weird homeschool kid stereotypes. It was so interesting because I had a friend call me a couple of months ago, and she was trying to decide, she had a 5-year-old, and she was trying to decide if she should put her child in public school or keep him at home. And the first thing I always tell them is, are you and your husband on the same page? Because that is very important. It's nice if your husband he doesn't necessarily have to be hands-on and all that. If he's not, have him come listen to Jesse's speech later. But but if he'll support you, and if he's supportive of the idea of homeschooling and keeping your kids at home, and that's super important. So is his name Dan? Yes, he mentioned that, and I totally agree. That's really important. Anyway, so that's the first thing I asked her was, is your husband on the same page? Yes, we're on the same page. Okay, good. And then she said, but I've always been so weird. I mean, I've always been so scared that if I keep my kids at home, they'll turn out weird. And I said, do you think my kids are weird? And of course she said, no, because we're friends. But I said, okay, what do you mean by weird? And she said, well, I can remember being in elementary school, and we would be at church, and we would go to Awanas, and, you could always tell who the homeschool kids are because, they would stand over in a little group, and they're just kind of weird and awkward, and you could just always tell. And I said, Rachel, were they weird? Or were they the ones who were being respectful, listening, and obeying, being kind to each other? And she was like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. So, perspective is important. I always say, if you're going to homeschool and you're going to homeschool long term, you have to be willing to let your kids look weird. But it's a good kind of weird. Okay, and I think that is all I have. Everything else, really, that I was going to talk about was touched on today by Jennifer and Dan, and it's really cool. We all kind of, and even the kids up here, who I thought did a great job. Those were all kind of things I wanted to touch on too. So,
all right. So we can open it up for a couple of minutes to some questions. If anybody has any questions for Annette, or I can just chat with Annette for just a couple of minutes.
We're used to chatting. So.
Yes, we are. So if you have a question, just go ahead and let me know, and we'll let you interrupt us. But other than that, we're just going to sit and chat for a few minutes because Annette has a lot of information to share with us all the time. She is my encourager on a regular basis, and I go to her about all sorts of different things, especially because she has kids that are just right ahead of my oldest, and so as I'm beginning to navigate what it means to school a teenage boy and a high schooler at that, that has been something that's come up. So let's just talk just for a couple of minutes, Annette, then about something that has been like on my heart for a while is, and you kind of touched on, is this, your focus is more on character development and developing a godly character inside your children. So when I was homeschooled, we were new, and I think I mentioned this, we're right on the cusp of the movement. It was a point where we were, it was legal where we were at, but people just did not know what homeschooling was. They hadn't ever heard of it before. And so I can remember our first few years, like if we drove by a cop in the middle of the day, like we'd duck down, like we were afraid of like getting arrested or pulled over for, why do you have your kids out in the middle of the day, sort of thing. So that is what kind of time I grew up in and started homeschooling in. And there was a huge push in the homeschool community at that time to like get your kids into Ivy League colleges and get them to graduate super early so that you could kind of prove to the rest of the world that, see, not only are we, homeschooling our kids, but we're beating you at it sort of attitude. We were just, the parents were just trying to prove themselves, and that was very much what it was about at first. And so I graduated when I was 16, and academics was very heavy. Now, my parents were believers, and they did impart a lot of godly wisdom in that, but I know that there are a lot of people out there that are like wrestling with, like, well, what does this look like, and if I'm missing something along the way. And for me, I've begun to like see my my generation of homeschoolers, some of whom went on to college, and now they have like no interest in homeschooling their own kids. And I go, what happened here? And so to me, I look back at that because I think that there was that push of, I'm going to prove myself and that I can teach my kids to the rest of the world. And it was almost to the detriment of some of our homeschool kids. Not all of them, but some of them, because there was such a push in that direction that it almost was like a failing on the character building portion of it. And I think that needs to be like addressed, that you don't have to prove yourself. You've already been proved. There was a generation before your kids that proved that. So when I went off to college for the first time, there were a lot of extra hoops for me to jump through because they had never admitted a homeschooler before. And that was not the case. That's not the case anymore. Colleges are like desperate to get homeschool graduates into their programs. In fact, if you go to a big homeschool convention in a large city, there will be tons of universities that are there, like trying to get your kids into their programs because they know that there are some of the sharpest, brightest minds out there.
And like the kids were saying earlier, they've already developed so many of the skills that incoming freshmen often don't have, like time management. Even, I have, almost 9 children. I guess I do have 9, but we haven't met this one yet. And so my older children have been given the opportunity and responsibility of, in some ways, not their full education, obviously, but in teaching their younger siblings, and then, of course, being that example to them, too. So they've already, and helping them learn time management and things like that.
So going into it then, like I know that, yes, my kids have studying skills, but at the end of the day, my goal has shifted from my parents' generation of homeschooling parents to this new homeschooling generation where it's, and it's not like that wasn't there. It was definitely always there, because I think that the homeschooling movement as a whole started out as very much a Christian thing, and now it's become more mainstream. But in the end, like, what's the one thing that you want your kids to take away from your homeschooling education, their homeschooling education? And that would be, for you.
Yes. I think Sarah said it best. That the thing that we have the opportunity to do for our kids is give them the time to hear what the Lord is telling them. And I told Sarah when she graduated, I said, right now, if you were in public school, we wouldn't trying to be deciding if you're going to be going to college. We would be looking at where. And so the question was different. It wasn't where are you going to go to school. It's, is this what the Lord has for you at this time? And for her, the answer was no. My other daughter is pretty sure she wants to become a nurse, so we've started her on that track. She's already in dual credit programs, and so her last 2 years of school would be spent getting hours in college, so that by the time she does graduate, she will be able to just transition right into her college. And so it seems like this is not always the case, but like Diego, he's only 14, and he already has a passion for writing, and you've allowed him to follow that and explore that. Sometimes they find out what they don't want to do, which is just as valuable. But so I think at an earlier age, can't say this across the board, of course, but they're allowed the freedom and the time to really see what God has for them and to follow that course and not waste the years and money and time that might be wasted otherwise.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bethany,
for sharing with us. And
thanks,
we
guys.
will get to listen to Annette later on for the Q&A, so we appreciate you being able to share. Right, now we are going to hear from another dear friend of mine who actually I had the privilege of traveling with recently all the way across the world to Macau, and she is just a wealth of wisdom, and she is on the other end of the homeschooling journey. She has all of her babies have finally graduated and flown the coop. Some of them are home right now because they are back because of COVID, but yes, so they're all grown and adults and navigating the other end of this. And so we're going to get to listen to Anna Scheller next. And so thank you, and join me in welcoming Anna right now.
Excuse me while I put my notes together here. I did this. I've been writing about what I was going to say ever since Bethany contacted me. And so I've had all these notes, scribbled everywhere. I put them all in a notebook because that's what homeschoolers do. And then last night after Taekwondo camp, I realized I had not put them into a cohesive talk to be coherent so that I sounded at least somewhat homeschooled. So I do want to say thank you to Bethany and Jesse and all who put this together. I think they did an amazing job, and I would like to give them a hand. Also, you heard from a lot of great people. I have the privilege of being one of the last speakers, which is a tough place because we heard about the resources that are available to homeschoolers. Those of you that are watching on the live stream, I hope that you listen to this again. Take the notes that you wish you could have taken and you didn't. We heard from Jennifer, and when Jennifer was done, I thought, well, I don't have much more to say. She talked a lot about how to manage your kids and incorporate school into your life. And then we had Dan. That was kind of fun, wasn't it? To see the whole spectrum of people who start from little. I mean, my kids have always been homeschooled. I didn't start out saying, I'm going to homeschool them through high school, but I did. And it was like Annette, it was a year-by-year process until it got to the point that I was convinced that homeschooling was the best education for my children. It may not be the answer for everybody, but it was the best answer for my children. And there were times, you were talking about the personality conflicts? I'll share one of those here shortly. Because the personality conflicts make for an interesting story, right? So my goal in this talk today is to talk to you about working and homeschooling. So how many of you work at home? Every single person here should be raising their hand. Mamas, you work from home. If you're on the live stream, you are probably working right now and listening to us in the background, right? Probably, I caught you. I know you're there. How many of you, though, are working either remotely at home or running a business or having to jump between your business or an employer and home? How many of you are there? If you're on the live stream, go ahead and raise your hand. All right, so this is about really not so much how do I make everything work between my job and my home. It's really about how do we manage homeschool in general and how do we add things in. I remember the first day that work and homeschool collided. Most people remember where they were when 9/11 happened. I remember I was packing a suitcase. We were getting ready to go on a vacation, one of the luxuries that my son talked about, the freedom you have to travel when you want. We were going to Alaska. Oh yeah, we were so psyched. And a friend calls and tells me that the airplanes are grounded, and I'm like, oh, come on, listen, Orson Welles, I get that, but this is crazy. So everybody remembers where they were 9/11. I bet when I say that, you immediately get an image in your head. I remember where I was when homeschool and work collided. I had just gotten my first tenant. We're in real estate investing. I'm not a property manager per se. I manage my own stuff. I buy and sell property. And we'd just gotten our first tenants. I was so excited. And while I'm working with these tenants, you know, I'd already set the kids on their homeschool. Okay, this is what you're going to do, da-da-da-da-da. And I just figured it would be a momentary thing. I'd get back to regular homeschool like I had been doing it all the time. One of the kids calls me on my cell phone and says, "Hey, Mom, Dad's home, and he's really not feeling well. He thinks he has the flu." I said, "He'll be fine. Just put him to bed. I'll be home when I get there." So probably about 8 o'clock that night. So I had been working since probably 9. 8 o'clock. Anybody can relate? And yeah, thank you, Jennifer. Amen, sister. 8 o'clock at night, I come in. I haven't had dinner. My kids are hungry. My husband's in bed. And they're like, "Mom, Daddy's really sick." This was my first day working, homeschooling, and being a wife. Did I forget to put that one in there too? Well, what ended up happening was the next day we took him to the hospital, and he ended up being in the hospital for 10 days with a staph infection. We ended up going to San Antonio. And let me tell you, Jennifer can agree, Annette, anybody in here who's done homeschooling, if you're watching in your homeschooling, I know you've had these days, these weeks. I don't remember what their homeschool looked like. I don't. I honestly don't remember. And the reason for it is because at that moment in time, my life became the school. My life was the classroom. So today what I want to share with you, some of it we've heard, you're just going to hear it from a little different perspective, from somebody who is really a veteran. As your bulletin says, I've been doing this for 28 years. If you are, by the way, if you're having a rough day and you're thinking about transferring your child to my homeschool, I'm not accepting transfers. Not. Are you accepting transfers, Bethany? No, Bethany's not. Annette? You have, she's already, she's growing her own transfers. And Jennifer might. So what I'm going to share with you, though, is I'm going to share with you how to manage all of this and stay sane in the process. My first point is that I want you to release the expectation that you have to run your school like the public school. Just let it go. Public schools are set up for a group of people learning the same thing all the time. Now let's walk through a typical public school. Just 1 hour. Just 1 hour with me, okay? The kids come in. This is probably middle school. Kids are coming in, and they sit down. Teacher takes attendance. That takes 5 minutes. The teacher teaches for 20 minutes if she doesn't have a behavior problem, if he or she does not have the fire drill go off, if there's no assembly called, right? You were saying that you worked in public school and it was tough to get through curriculum. It was tough to get through a year of curriculum. Let's say, just for grins and giggles, that the teacher gets the 20 minutes of education in. Then there's 20 minutes of letting the student work through whatever work. Maybe it's a discussion, maybe it's the problems, or a writing exercise, whatever it is. Oh no, now we've got 45 minutes into class. The kids are getting restless. By the way, they're not learning anything at this point. They're just ready to get out of that class because they know they only have about 10 minutes before they have to get to the next class, and the whole thing starts over. Actual instruction in that hour was what? 20 minutes. Yeah, possibly 20 minutes. Possibly 20 minutes. And then they only do that 6 hours. So the total time of instruction is only 2 hours for the whole day. 2 hours. Did you know that when tutoring, it actually only takes about 3 to 4 hours a week of tutoring to be the equivalent of a week of school if a child is stuck home because of some kind of physical crisis? So when you're having Alexander's no good, very bad day, remember, 1 day with you is worth 1,000 days in public school or any school. Now, I'm not dissing the schools. They are there. They do a great service to our community. But what I'm talking to you as a homeschooling parent now, whether you do it for 6 months, a year, or you take them through the rest of the time. Any time you're spending with your child is valuable, and your entire life is your classroom. Remember that. Remember that. Curriculum is your tool. It is not your master. It is not there to tell you what to teach your child. It is there for you to instill a love of learning in that child. It's a powerful tool, but that's all it is. Annette talked about the fear of the Lord being the beginning of wisdom. If you start your day, no matter what happens, with Scripture, with talking about how Scripture applies to their life, yeah, you're going to get those days where they're going to just sit there and wish that they were somewhere else. Those days happen in any home. But you're still instilling, you are instilling a basis for your education that is powerful and that is going to take them farther than knowing what year the War of 1812 started. By the way, spoiler alert, it was 1812. Just saying. The second thing that you want to keep in mind is how to set clear boundaries. This is just a good life parenting lesson. Who was it that said, I think Jennifer was saying, that you're just taking it up a level in parenting, right? You're actually becoming more parenting, I guess, is what you say. So if you're having trouble with boundaries with your kids, I have a very good thing to tell you. It will get amplified when you're home with them a lot more. So there are ways to set good boundaries that will be conducive to the atmosphere you want to have in your home. So first of all, if you're working at home, then I highly recommend that you have a location that's just for your work. If you can have a door, a curtain, I wouldn't recommend a closet, but if that's what you have a location that's just for work. And here's why. When I'm in that location, it's a signal to the family that I am not available for whatever is the latest problem, the latest catastrophe. And I've had a few catastrophes in my homeschool. You know, we've just had a lot of things happen in 28 years with 7 kids. Yeah, we can talk about those during the Q&A, okay? Setting a physical boundary, really having that visual for your family is really, really important. And earlier, somebody was talking about office hours. I would actually set some office hours. Like from this time to this time, that's mommy's time to work, or daddy's time to work, to focus on work. And then from this time to this time is our time to do school. So that does a couple of things for us. One is it enables us to focus on the task at hand. How many people have you heard say, well, I can multitask? You ever heard that? If you are doing a disservice to your family as well as to yourself and the people you are serving. Our brains are not wired for multitasking. They really are not. We need to focus on one thing at a time, and that needs to be and that makes us very productive. We can have all of our energy, all of our attention on that. We serve our employers better. If you're in business for yourself, then you're serving your customers better. You're serving your family better, because they are learning too that mommy or daddy are not accessible all the time. Sometimes because we're home, we feel like we should be accessible to the kids all the time. And I'm going to tell you something. Children are they're better at guilt than Jewish mothers. I am telling you, when I first started working, my kids would sit there and they would whine. And they would tell me how I'm not being a good mother because I wasn't spending as much time with them. And I'm going to be honest with you, just, being real here. I believed them. I struggled with that guilt because I want to be the best mom ever. They tell me that I am, but of course they're grown up and they're gone now, so of course I'm the best mom ever. They don't have anything to lose by saying that anymore, right? So when we're focused, but the kids can lay these guilt trips on us. And so there's two other things when it comes to boundaries that are really, really important. You have to be able to deal with the interruptions that are invariable with children. They're going to happen. They are simply going to happen. And so you make a plan to deal with that. First of all, if you have a child, we had a rule in our house. And that rule was you could interrupt mom. They could interrupt me. Absolutely. But it had to be about blood or fire. That meant somebody was dying, hemorrhaging. A broken bone would count there too. Or getting shot in the eye. Yeah, we had a few of those. We did. Yeah, when you get this phone call, Mom, I shot my sister in the eye. You did what? Could you come and help us? Sure, I'll be right there. That was worth an interruption, wouldn't you say? Absolutely. The other one was fire. I did have a pyro in my house. Thank God he's married and he lives in Florida. He does. Hallelujah. He has a fire pit too. So he can do whatever he wants to his heart's content. So if they came to us, of course everything is urgent. Has your child ever come to you and say, well, Mom, it's really not important. I don't want your attention right now. How many of you had the kids say that? Okay, nobody? Awesome. We're going to start that club. Anyway, so we would look at them and go, is it blood? So we would say, excuse me, is it blood or is it fire? Neither. Then it can wait. Now, what they also knew that I have the attention span of a flea at times. So what we did teach them, we knew that it was important to them. Urgent, not. Somebody wasn't dying. I didn't need to take somebody to the emergency room, and nobody had started a fire in my house. So what we taught them to do was to stand next to us so that when there was a break, or they were there really just as a reminder that I needed to attend to whatever that was. So there are legitimate interruptions, and we allowed our children to interrupt us, but they couldn't just rush up and jump in and create that space for themselves. And the other thing too is that when we were with them, then we let people know that we were with our family. And I'm going to tell you, I've been in the business world a while now. People respect that. If I say, I can't get to it right now, I'm with my children, they'll go, oh yeah, no problem. Can you help? Can I get some help elsewhere? And if they need something, I take care of it, or I get somebody else to help them. If not, most people are very gracious and will wait. We do not, we still have control over what happens in our life. And so I would also have a backup plan, because on the terrible, no good, very bad day, and you will have them, I promise, you want to have some kind of fallback that you can go to. My fallback was books. This is a very old book. It's Laura Ingalls Wilder, By the Shores of Silver Lake. We always had books around. So if for some reason our days got thrown out of whack, or weeks, or the 2 months where my mother was dying and I had to fly up to Washington State to be with her, we had books. We usually focused on, they had to do writing, they had to do their Bible, they had to do writing, they had to do some reading, and they always had to do math. That was something that we made sure happened. Math, because math skills get rusty if they're not used on a regular basis. Reading, because there's so much they learn from reading. And writing, because writing helps them think. So I would have a backup plan for those days, because you're going to have them. And maybe you can say on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, we're going to do this. And Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're going to be a little lighter on the schedule, so that stuff that doesn't get done on Mondays and Wednesdays can slide into Friday. but have a plan, have something that you can fall back on, because when you have to have a detour, you still have to get back on the road. And you may have lost some time, but you will never lose that time with your children again. The very last thing I wanted to share with you was to take care of yourself. We as homeschoolers, especially those who are working in addition to working inside our home, we tend to go ragged from the moment we wake up to the moment we drop, and hopefully we're falling asleep. It just goes, and you want to be there for everyone, right? You want to, you stayed home to homeschool because that was your heart. That's what you wanted to do. You wanted to be there for your kids. But you also have a business and you want to grow that business. Or you have an employer and you want to give the very best to the employer. And not to forget that in the evening, there's your spouse, your husband, or your wife. It's so easy to let the demands of everyone else dictate your life. And there has to be a place where you take care of you. It's the old idea that we put our oxygen mask on first. Then we take care of the person in the seat next to us. There was a point in my life where I thought I would rather die than get out of bed. Now, I wasn't contemplating suicide. I was just exhausted. And I didn't even want to face my kids, my husband, or my business. I just wanted God to take me home. I figured it would be easier in heaven if I didn't have any responsibilities. Now, I don't know if that's the case. I'm sure we've got things we'll have to do in heaven. But I was so ready. I was so ready. I was telling somebody this, and they said, what time do you spend for yourself? And I said, I don't know. I can't think of any time. They said, you have to do that. And so the things that we did, we started incorporating. So there were some things I did just for me. So I started reading books. I have a series of books that I love to read. They're culinary murder mysteries. If you're interested in what they are, I'll be happy to share that with you. I love those books. Now, they're not the cleanest in terms of language. I'm an adult. I don't have to say the things that are always in the books, okay? If you disagree with me, that's cool. We'll have a discussion because I love discussing differences. That's really cool. I always make sure I get some quiet time. That is probably, if you're making your kids do Bible, don't just do your Bible time with your children. Make sure you're taking time to praise God, worship Him, love on God, let Him love on you. That is so important. The Father knows what you need, and He loves you so much. He's not going to let you drown. He's not going to let you suffocate. He promises that if you are going through the waters, He's going to be with you. He's going to be your strength. Make sure that you're taking time to experience joy and gratitude every single day. The joy of the Lord is your strength. When you feel weary, just remember that there's no fire, there are no demons, there are no angels, there's nothing in your past, there's nothing in your future, there's nothing that can separate you from the love of God. Amen? And so when you're having your terrible, no good, very bad day, you can always count on God. And you have that foundation there. The other thing I want to encourage you to do is make sure you're getting regular exercise. Exercise is not necessarily profitable for spiritual growth, although I will tell you I see a lot of parallels between exercise and spiritual growth. But the exercise will also give you energy to tackle things in the day. They really, really will. I am a 4th degree black belt. I got my black belt through the school here at Esperanza First, and Esperanza before we joined with First Baptist. The reason I got started in it was because I wanted to have something to do with my kids. My kids loved the martial arts, so that's what I did. I just started doing it with them. Now, understand that my goal was to get to blue belt and consider my options at that point. Obviously, 13 years later, I made some different decisions, right? But what got me on the start of exercise was that my kids were doing it. And when they were little, what I did is I had a neighbor that she was homeschooling as well. So every single morning we would get together, 9 o'clock, and we would walk together. So I had somebody that was older than 12 years old to talk to. That's also very important. Right? How many moms would agree that talking to somebody that's actually understands what's going on is important, right? And isn't asking you for something? Boy, I have stories about David I could tell you that are fun. But so getting back to that, and then the kids had their friends that they were walking. Kept me healthy. I had good companionship, and my kids got to spend time with friends. And so exercise, your quiet time, and following as much of a routine as you possibly can. But have grace for yourself when things fall apart. Stuff's going to happen. That's just life. I don't care if your kid is in public school, private school, or you're homeschooling. It's going to happen. Give yourself grace. I want to close with a story. This is a true story of how what you're doing still gets your kids ready for the life, for even college, even if you think you're failing. Annette talked about a personality conflict. So some of you know I have seven children. My second daughter, Stephanie, is very strong-willed, and that is an understatement. Stephanie does not believe, or she didn't, now she does because she has a business, and I think she pays an accountant to do this now, though. I think so. I don't know how important she thinks math is, but she never believed math was important. She did not understand why you had to have math in school. Did not. I mean, live stream folks, do you have any kids like that? Any of you have kids that just questioned the value of algebra? That was my Stephanie. But it started early before algebra. When we would do the times tables, she could not understand how 3 times 3 was not 6. She argued with me for the longest time. She still argues with me, just for fun now. But she believed that 3 times 3 was 6. I could not make her believe that it was 9. So that was obviously a failure on my part. I get it. When we moved to Alaska, so I'm watching my time here. When we moved to Alaska, we were part of a homeschool school district. And one of the requirements was that our children at certain ages had to be, they had to do the California Achievement Test, I think it is. Yeah, the CAT, the California Achievement Test. And wouldn't it be my day, but Stephanie had to be the one to do the test. I just was like, couldn't we do the 7th grade? Sarah could do this. Sarah could do this, but it had to be Stephanie. They sent us the books to practice, and I would sit with Stephanie at the table. We would look at the book. We would open the book, and she would immediately start crying and pitching a fit. Why do I have to do this? I don't like this. I don't want to do this. I don't understand why you're making me do this, Mom. I'm just in there going, just try, right? Please, just try. And we did this 3 times before I finally called the teacher who was going to proctor the test. I said, I don't think this is going to work. She said, don't worry about it. Just bring her to the test, make sure she signs her name, and if she needs to leave, that'll be okay. So the day of the test, I pack everybody in the car. I have my 5-inch thick cell phone that I'm carrying. This was back in the late 90s. And I pack everybody in the car, and I drop Stephanie off. I make sure that the proctor has my phone number, because I am going to come and rescue that test from my daughter. I just knew she was going to be a problem. So I left. We start driving around, trying to stay as close to the testing site as possible, because I kept expecting the phone call. An hour passes, and 2, 3. Before I know it, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I need to go pick her up from the test. When I go to pick her up, I said, so, how was it? She goes, oh, Mommy, that was fun. Can we do it again? And I'm like, what did you do? what happened here? Well, I'm going to ask you guys, if I've told you the answer, don't say it. But I'm going to ask you, where do you think overall she stood in the CAT? Thinking percentiles. Anybody want to try? Oh, I wish it was that good. But it was close. It was close. She was in the 94th percentile overall. I did not teach to a test. She did really well. Now I'm going to ask another question. How do you think she did on math computation? Percentile-wise. Math computation. It was a little higher than 10. She was in the 28th percentile in math computation, but she still went middle of the road, so she was around the 50th percentile when it came to math concepts. Now, I didn't need a test to tell me that, but it was very gratifying to know that she was still learning in spite of everything that was going on. So I want to encourage you, no matter what happens in your life, no matter how things shake out, you've made the right decision, whether it's for 6 months, a year, or for the rest of their school. And I want to applaud you for your decision and let you know that we are here and we're available to help you through your journey. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. And right now, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do a Q&A session with some of our people who have already given a speech and another special guest as well. So if you'll come up here, ladies, the ones that we've spoken to about doing a Q&A, come on up and we'll get microphones set up and then we'll go ahead and do a little bit of talking about homeschooling, just kind of. Oh, and we've got another special guest. Yes? Would you like to come and join?
Oh, there's 2 more I'll sit and
Just a Q&A. Come on up, Ryan.
Mine was already turned on, so I'm good.
Surprise.
I can do Facebook, but dang about these mics.
Here, I'll let you have this
That?
chair right
Is that working,
here.
Justin?
Is that for us?
Are you homeschooling, Mom?
He's a homeschool parent, and he's going to join us as well. Surprise!
Thanks.
Here
I didn't
you
know
go.
I was doing this.
All right, very good. Okay, so I'm going to come over here to this side, and then we'll just kind of chat a little bit about homeschooling. But first, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves? Tell how you got into homeschooling. What was that thing that made you think, I'm going to do this? Unless you've already shared it in your speech, and then you can kind of recap.
Okay, my name is Marcia Wilson, and my homeschooling journey started before I had children. I had a very good friend, and she had children in the public school system. And one day she went to school to pick up her kids, and they were like, "Oh, Mom, we're so excited! We had a party for the witches today." She about fell over, and so I said, "You're kidding me! Like they're allowed to do that? They can't talk about God, but they can have a party for witches? I don't think I'm ever sending my kid to public school." And I didn't until Bethany, who you heard earlier, insisted that she go. And then she was like, "Sorry, I made that decision." But that's my journey.
I'm Anna Scheller. I didn't share at the beginning of my homeschool journey, but it really started when we started to attend a series of seminars about how to be better people. You may be familiar with the Bill Gothard Institute. And it was there that I first started to consider home education. And then I realized that I really wanted my children to have the values that were important to me as a Christian and as a parent. And so I just never wanted them to have that kind of exposure. I didn't want them celebrating witches. I didn't want them celebrating things that were contrary to my belief. And I wanted to be able to share And if nothing else, they could walk away knowing that God was real and that God had a plan for their life. And so that's why my husband and I chose to homeschool.
I'm Annette Poole, and I did share a little bit earlier about how we started to homeschool. I came home from public school teaching in 2000 when our first daughter was born, and I never thought that I would be homeschooling, and I literally had a picture of sending an innocent little lamb into a den of wolves when she was in kindergarten, and I know that seems a little extreme, but we just decided at that point that she wasn't going to go to kindergarten, and then it was first grade, and then second, and then just year by year.
I can't send this precious thing that I love so much away to somebody else for 8 hours a day. They won't teach them or love on them or instill in them the values that we can do. So let's just keep her here this year. And we've been pretty much year to year since.
Very good. Okay. And my name is Bethany Rodriguez, and so my experience is a little bit different in the fact that my mom actually homeschooled me, and so I had a positive experience with that. We started homeschooling when I started fourth grade. My brother was in second, and my little sister was in kinder, and so my mom's goal was just to get us through middle school, because middle school had been such a horrible experience for her that she didn't want that for us, and she actually gave me the option of whether or not I wanted to go back to public school, and I said no, thank you, when that time came. And I knew before I had even met my husband that that's what I wanted to do with my kids, because it had been such a good experience for me. I felt like my parents had been able to instill those values in me, to teach my heart to love the Lord, and so because of that, I just wanted that for my own family when it came time. So my own husband, who gets to talk later, kind of got suckered into it pretty early on, and thankfully likes it now. So yeah. So with that being said, let's go into like that one of like the hardest moments of your homeschooling season, and some of you may have touched on this already, because I don't want anybody to just think that it's a field of daisies that you're just walking through, and it's all, we just go out into the day and spend it outside and read all the time, and there are those beautiful moments, but it's not just that. There's a lot of hard, difficult times in between, and so talk about those hard moments and what makes you stick with it even in those hard moments.
Okay, the hard moments. Every year, May 1st is a hard moment. You're done. You're tired. You're exhausted. You think, I can't do this for another day. But you do, and then you take the summer off, or like when we lived in North Carolina, we took a month off every, 9 or 12 weeks. They do year-round school there, so we followed the school schedule so the kids could play with their friends and things. So, and then you're all refreshed and you're ready to go again. But I think the two really hardest moments for me homeschooling was when our oldest was finally diagnosed with no real diagnosis, just that she had brain trauma during birth, and so her brain doesn't work like anybody else's. So go forth and figure out how to make her know her addition tables again this year. And then the other one was when I hit chemistry with Bethany. She wanted to be a doctor for the longest time. And we got to chemistry. I never took chemistry. And chemistry is not about experiments. Chemistry is about crazy mathematics. And so that was really hard for me. Eventually, my oldest we met some amazing people along the way. We lived in Virginia, and we met a woman who said, you know, if you'll do this, she can go to college. When she got her diagnosis, they were like, you know, good luck getting her through school. You should just immediately go enroll her in public school so she can have special education. But that woman was such a blessing to us. And then when we moved here to Del Rio, we met another lady who actually does a lot of study with the brain and taught us some things that we could do with her that actually increases her brain function if she'll do them. They're weird. She didn't like them. She was a teenager, but I would make her do them faithfully. And she did go to college. She has a certificate, which is amazing. And Bethany decided she did not want to be a doctor, so chemistry turned out not to matter.
I think for us, I can't go into a ton of detail, but we had 2 of our children suffer sexual assault. If you want to know what hell is, I'm going to tell you that's hell. And we still had to keep going. We still had to keep working, and the potential for division in our family was very strong, in spite of the fact that we were homeschooling. And yet, I believe that the homeschooling experience is what kept us strong. One of our children came to us after she left school and told us that she was an atheist. I'm just being real here. Because there aren't any guarantees, guys, that what we're doing is going to give us the product that we're hoping for. But I will tell you that all of those experiences taught me. I asked the Lord, what was I supposed to learn in those difficult times? And I can't say I learned the lessons well. You know, obviously it's a little hard for me to speak, but I feel it's important to share that you need to stay close to the Lord. You need to continue to communicate with your children, because they may or may not make the decisions you want for them. But I will tell you, from my oldest to the youngest who just graduated from high school last year, we are still a very close family in spite of everything. And I credit a lot of it to my husband's and my dedication to Christ and the lessons we learned through homeschooling. And those were the toughest times I think I'd ever had. And let me tell you, if I can go through it, anybody can.
I was thinking that for me, the hardest time was getting used to a shift work schedule. I was a stay-at-home mom, so I didn't have a work schedule to worry about. But when my husband started working shift work, and his shifts were always changing and his days off were always changing, and we couldn't have much structure and routine like what I thought structure and routine should look like, that was very, very difficult.
Remember, she taught at the public school.
Yeah.
Routine.
And I lived by a day planner in college, so and I kept asking God, I'm like, God, you gave me this personality and this life. Like, how's this supposed to work? I really couldn't. It took me, I still, honestly, I still struggle with it 13 years later. When the shift changes and our whole schedule has to change, that is very, very difficult for me.
I may get in trouble. So there's been one particular time, and I'm sure these ladies have shared that it is not easy homeschooling. It is not. Especially when you have kids that are really close in age, and also when you have kids that are really far apart in age. So, I remember a time, I apologize in advance, I remember a time that she was having a very difficult time with trying to keep it all together, the homeschooling, the being a mom, the toddlers crawling on her, and trying to do all this, and she's just like,
And I was probably pregnant.
no, I don't think so. No, we had the 3, but we didn't have the other. See, we have 2 sets. Two sets. We have an older set of 3, and then there's like a 6-year gap, and then we have, I don't know how many, a lot after that. Yeah. Well, so in the early ones, just starting out, it's okay to not be in control. It's okay to, how do you say it? To not get everything done that you think you need to get done on your day planner. Because there will be spilt milk. There will be diapers to change. There will be this to change. When you get older, you have chemistry to go through, but guess what? You still may be changing diapers too. So I've seen there's been a couple times when, and she does a fantastic job, but there's been times where I've seen her really, really struggle with life. Life as a mom, life with toddlers, life with teenagers, life with homeschool, life with now trying to get kids in college. It's not easy, it's a struggle, but you get through it. What I tell you the other day? Just one thing at a time. One thing at a time. Okay, we can change his diaper, and then we got to work on our ABCs. Right? Yes, you have Cheerios all over his face. That's fine, but I'm working on something else right now. Those things happen, and it's okay to feel out of control, but don't give up.
Thank you. Thank you. So, for me, I have a son who has struggled with reading, and that has been one of the most difficult things for me to deal with, because I came from an education background, and I thought I should be able to figure this out by now. And honestly, there are just times when it's not easy. You don't know exactly how to navigate all of that, and there has been a lot of like fears and what ifs, and and I think this is the beauty in community and homeschooling, and why it's so necessary is because when you are struggling with, oh, this kid can't read, or oh, that kid has an attitude, it's really good to be able to get together with moms and dads who are experiencing the exact same thing, and who may also be able to say, hey, I know of a resource, or I have this other curriculum that I think maybe you should give a try, this one a try. And so that is one of the reasons that we wanted to do this today, is to reach out to the community and say, hey, this is going on, and we know that there's a lot of fears, and stepping out and doing something that's been completely different than what you have done before with, you were in public school, and now we're going into taking our kids home and schooling them there. And there's a lot of fear involved in that, but I think that there's so much good when we get together and have community and fellowship with one another. God designed us for fellowship with one another, and that is where we get what we need to keep on going and doing the things that He has called us to. And I personally feel that homeschooling is something that God has called me to, and so I have to continue to be faithful to that, even if it gets hard. So, and there are definitely days when it's hard. There are days when I've wanted to chase down the school bus and say, just take them for the day, please. So I think everybody's had a day like that, but I think we all feel the same way about jobs that we've had, that we really loved and have a lot of rewarding things with the work that we've done, but there are still days where we're like, oh, if I could be done just for the day, that would be fabulous with me. So going into that, I know that we talked a little bit about scheduling. You kind of hinted on that a little bit, but let's talk about what that actually looks like, because it varies so much from family to family, and I want people to begin to understand that it should vary, because it needs to meet your personal needs. And so even though I'd been homeschooled, my mom homeschooled us from a very public school perspective. I shared earlier that when we first started, she would have us like stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance. We had this teeny tiny little flag, and we would do that every single morning. And there were several other things that were very public school in nature that we just did because that's what school looked like in her mind. So then from me teaching in the public and then the private schools, and then going back to teaching at home finally when it was time to start our own schooling at home, it was hard for me to remember, oh yeah, it doesn't have to look like that. In fact, it shouldn't necessarily look like that. What does your day, or what did your day kind of look like, so that people can understand what that means for them?
I was a big fan of something that they called unschooling for a while. And I won't go into the details of it. You can figure it out for yourself. But one of the things that my friends who actually did it, because my husband said, no, you're not doing that. They taught me to have bigger goals than what am I going to get done today. So we threw out the daily, you're going to do reading, and then you're going to do math, and then you're going to do social studies. I turned to more like weekly and monthly goals, and I always had an overall goal for the whole year, even when I was on the, got to do reading first, and then math, and then this and that. We would kind of work through a day a little bit according to the preference of the child, but there were always one or two subjects every single year that all of my children did together. And since I didn't talk earlier, let me just take a moment. There's an 8-year gap between my oldest and my youngest, and I only have 3. So we were like in very different stages of schooling all the time. Kind of like Annette's always in, but she has a lot, and I just had a few. But I always made sure every year that we would do 1 or 2 subjects together, and everybody would sit together and we would learn together. So sometimes we would start the day with that. It was a very flexible schedule, but at the end of the week, they had to have finished all the work they needed to finish.
I started out fairly structured because when I started, of course, my daughter Sarah was only about 4 or 5, and I felt that structure was very important. And as we added kids into the mix, of course, structure and routine became extremely important. If not for their sanity, it was for mommy's sanity. As they grew older and they started, we followed very much a very literature-based program. Some of you maybe have heard of it, the Sunlight Curriculum. And if you're looking for something that is literature-based, it's an excellently organized program. And even if you don't follow the program, the books are amazing. But a lot of what we did was we made sure that there was always dictation, because dictation did a lot of things. One, it taught grammar. It taught spelling. It taught listening. And I valued dictation. So we made sure that dictation happened every day when they were in elementary school. We made sure reading happened every day, all through school. Of course, math was essential. And usually I made sure that the subjects were woven into all of those 3 things. We did unit studies, we did a lot of things. Now, as the students got older, or my children got older, one of the fun things was that they started to teach each other. That was the coolest thing. So if I was busy, especially as my business started to grow, when I was getting busy, the older kids would help the younger kids with math. And that was such a relief to me. And the older kids, I did what Marcia was talking about. They had their lessons that they had to go through. I actually had office hours, if you will. So if I was busy and I could not get to them during a day, what I did is I would make sure that at least every other day I set aside time to go over something that they were not understanding or they were having difficulty with. And that, I think, is maybe why David has such and all of my children have not had a difficult transition to college, because they've had to work through things on their own. It just happened. With a large family, it just happens. And plus, when you're running a business, it just happens. And so as they got older, I was less in control of their schedule. Now, I'm going to also add that with that, probably only 2 of my children ever graduated, quote unquote, on time. I only had 2 that graduated by the time they were 18 years old. Yes, thank you, Justin. The others messed around. They said, well, Mom's not paying attention, right? And then what ended up happening was they turned 19, and they're like, oh, no, Dad's going to get upset if I don't finish school, or I'm not applying for college or something like that. And so all of a sudden, they took care of 2 years in one. It was amazing. But all of them are successful. All of my children are successful. And they all got into colleges on scholarships, academic scholarships. All of them are doing well. David just got accepted into the Army on an academic scholarship with ROTC. I've got one that's a physical therapist. I have another one who's an intelligence officer in the Air Force. I have one who runs, both my oldest daughters run their own businesses now. And then I have Susanna, who, if you've been to our church, you know how well she plays the piano, dedicated to music, and Danielle, who is now coming up in her own. And so, even though my schedule wasn't really strict, in the later years, my kids still benefited a lot. And I would say, of course, I'm a little prejudiced, I think they're well adjusted, and I think they're quite successful. And I give that to their self-motivation, their relationship with God, or the one who doesn't right now. She'll come back. Because I'm a praying mom, okay? I'm a praying mom. But they'll get there. And the schedule's important, if not only for you, but for them. But it's not the Bible when it comes to your school.
I forgot the question.
Sorry.
Your schedule. I want to know about your schedule.
Okay. The way I picked a curriculum is like this. What can I get excited about? Because I knew that if I could get excited about it, then that would transfer to them. And if I hated it and did not look forward to it every day and dreaded it, then that was going to also transfer to them. So that's how I picked my first curriculum. Also, Ryan encouraged me I went with Sunlight also in the beginning, because it is a very structured, it gives you exactly what you need to do, and it's a literature-based program, and so you do a lot of reading with your kids, a lot of sitting on the couch or out in the grass or wherever, and you're just reading, and then you're bringing in the history and the science and the literature and everything that you want to cover through one book that you're reading together, or a couple of books that you're reading together. And so that's how we started out. I have since tried a lot of different things, but my big kids have pretty much stuck through the Sunlight because they learned the system, and as soon as they were about in 7th grade, they could begin to just follow the schedules for themselves, and they were pretty much self-learners at that point, and all I would have to do is check that they were doing what they're supposed to do.
Self-directed learning with supervision. I mean, that's basically what you're talking about.
Which is the goal, right? You want them to be self-motivated, self-directed learners. And I know a lot of people worry about college. We've talked about that a lot, but those are the skills they need to be successful in college. I've done a little bit different with my little kids. Unschooling, did you say? Every day, like I pointed out earlier, I try to make sure it doesn't happen every single day, but I try to make sure that we start out with our Bible. We do a short reading, a little discussion. Usually, you get the best discussions with your kids at that point. They're asking questions and they're talking to each other. And yes, you have to stop and go potty, and somebody needs a snack, and we already got a glass of milk that you already spilled that we've cleaned up. But just push through all those distractions and remember that what you're doing is important. And we start out with a Bible study, and we do a little bit of scripture memory every day. And then I do try to make sure that we get through reading, writing, and math. But honestly, it takes us, I have a 5th grader, and an hour and a half or less is all we spend. And then the rest of the day, they are, I guess one of the big things is being able to take the time when they bring a caterpillar to you to stop what you're doing and be excited about it with them. You don't even have to know what it is or how many legs it has. Just be excited about it with them and talk about the pretty green color or whatever, and they're learning on their own through discovering.
I would like to go back and touch on something you said earlier about having one that struggles with reading, and Marcia, you discussed having one that struggled with learning in general. This is one of the greatest facets of homeschooling to me, is that I remember back in the day, George W. Bush passed this thing saying no child left behind, right? Truly, homeschooling is the only place that can happen. Because in a public school setting, you have 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 kids in a room. There is no way that a kid who is slow in a particular area, not dumb, but maybe just not quite grasping it, can keep up with the one who's got it like that. So in homeschooling, we're able to actually, okay, that one has that struggle. We need to focus that particular subject with that child. This one over here may not have it. He may already passed that one, even though it's older. They have a different cognitive level. And so I think it's a huge benefit for homeschooling for that aspect alone, because we have one that struggles with math, brilliant in everything else, but just struggles with math, and we found out, just give her a little bit of time, don't push her, and she figures it out. But in a homeschool setting, you got an hour, bell rang, oh, you're done, get the homework turned in. She used to really get upset when we would try to get her going, and okay, it's a simple concept, let's work on it, and just shut down. She would just shut down. Okay, we learned. Give her some space, work with her a little bit, and then she gets it. You can't get that at a public school.
Well, and the support's there. So if the child is slow, you don't have the bullies in the class making fun of the child. The kids, they have their differences, but I never found that my children belittled each other for a lack of development or growth. Not once.
And that's, I think, really important to remember. I know in public schools when I was teaching, it was such a struggle to, you always taught to kind of the middle. You didn't teach as fast as some of them could go, and you didn't teach slow as some of them needed. And at the point that I was teaching, I didn't have children, and so I could stay after school and help with those that were just needing that extra help. But that's not the case for all teachers. They don't have that ability to stay after school or put in those extra hours with those kids. And so it's really, it can be detrimental to a child that needs that extra help. But there is also beauty on that flip side, like you can allow your kid to take off and advance at a really rapid pace at the same time, or you can slow down and take the time that that child needs to develop, no matter what that is. And so that's really a really beautiful part of homeschooling. So my schedule right now is sort of this, and it changes from year to year, and this is in my head how it's going to work. So, but it's kind of a rendition of last year's schedule as well. So, a couple of years ago, I realized, okay, they already know. Okay, we always do pages A and B the first day of the week in math, and then they do C and D. So I just printed out the schedule, and they put it in a sleeve cover where they can see through, and then they get a marker and they mark off for that week, and then we clean it off beginning of Monday. So this is everything you have to do on Monday. This is everything you have to do on Tuesday, Wednesday, etc. And so my older kids are able to work on almost everything independently at this point. So I don't care what order they do it in. I just want it done. And as soon as you're done, you are free to do whatever else you want with your day. I always include their chores in the list because I don't want them to go and do whatever they want for the rest of the day until they have those done. And I don't care what order they're done in most of the time, although I do want you to empty the dishwasher early on so that so can fill it. Those sorts of things are important. But as a whole, work in whatever order you want and get it done. I work a lot more with my younger two because they're still elementary age. And so I spend a lot more of my time with them individually working on reading, and they'll read Bible to me, and I'll work with them if they need help on math and that sort of thing. But overall, I give them the freedom to say, oh, I want to work on this first, or I want to work on that. So have you ever had a student or a child, I guess, not do a subject, especially as they're starting to work independently, and then you don't get checked up on them every once, and you've let it go for a few weeks and they've noticed, and then all of a sudden you realize, they haven't completed like a month's worth of math. I'm asking this question because
Maybe I should go
because
check.
I have experienced it myself as a student, where my mom had kind of gotten away from checking that often, and then my brother did the same thing, and my sister a few years later did the same thing.
How
And then
terrible.
when my own child did it, it didn't surprise me at all. But I think that is something that, especially as our kids begin to work independently, that you need to be aware of. But surely this isn't just my family experience. Anybody else have that
I
same
don't think
sort of
I've ever
experience?
heard that before. I think you're the only one.
I would
Absolutely.
love to say my kids were perfect, but I had some masters at that. I mean, they out there. Bethany already told y'all when she got to geometry. She just decided a month in that she was not going to do it. And we battled for a couple of months, and then I finally said, fine, whatever. But you don't get to graduate high school till you do geometry. So 2 years later, she was like, oh, Mom's serious. I'll do my geometry now. But yeah, every kid does that, I think.
Yeah.
I think that is one of the hardest things I think about schooling your own children, is keeping them accountable and you keeping accountable, because those things do happen, and you don't get to check their work every day, and they're not all on the same thing, so it's like checking 6 different things sometimes. And so yeah, that is I think definitely one of the struggles.
But on the other hand, as we're thinking about this, and do the improv thing, yes, and I think that happened more often than I probably was aware of in our homeschool. That's why I had kids who were 19 years old and suddenly, all of a sudden realized, oh my gosh, if I'm going to go to college, if I'm going to not get in trouble with Dad, and that was the big thing. My husband had an expectation that everybody would go to college. And so if you were not looking for a college, if you were not starting to look at testing and all of that stuff, Dad took it. So if my level of supervision and accountability didn't work, Dad's did. And Daddy had a way. Now, one of the things that did happen that I found was that when they were motivated, oh my goodness, they could get through that material so much faster. I mean, yeah, it wasn't like pulling teeth anymore. And then I had the one who would fret because her books had not arrived so that she could get done on time so that she could take the summer off. That's my youngest one, who's now going to a school in Los Angeles, or she was going to a school in Los Angeles.
Until COVID hit us.
Until COVID hit us. But I think that's pretty normal, and I think that that's one of those things we can't beat ourselves up over. We discover it, and we deal with it, and the kids understand that what goes around comes around, and it does come around.
Absolutely. The biggest thing to really consider with that is that the public school students also do that.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
I know many high school students who are doing, I guess they call it credit recovery now. And so they're working either through the whole summer or they're doing extra classes after school so that they can graduate on time. It's just a kid thing.
Yeah, it is. And so, yeah, I think the first time it happens, for a lot of parents, it's like, whoa, what happened? So I want to make sure, especially if you are homeschooling or beginning to homeschool middle school, high school kids, especially where they're more independent than you would maybe find at an elementary level, to be aware that that is something that will happen. And don't beat yourself up too bad about it. And no, you can just keep on going. Sometimes doing a little bit of math to make up for the weeks that you missed in the middle of the summer are a good learning lesson. And I think that it's a really a great learning lesson to experience at the high school, middle school level, where you can still make those mistakes and learn from them there versus learning them in college and then having it be such an expensive, detrimental learning lesson. So it's good for them to learn that lesson.
And I don't know if you remember Sarah saying that one of her favorite memories was getting to spend time with her dad on his days off. And that was something that they wouldn't have gotten to do because of the shift work. Sometimes his days off are Tuesday, Wednesday, or whatever. And so they wouldn't have gotten to spend time with him. So I know that's one of the motivators for my kids is our weekends, our dad's weekends, no matter what days of the week that is. And especially for my little kids now, they want to spend that time with him. And they don't want to be having to do their math when he's home.
I encourage playing hooky.
Yeah. And if he has 3 days off, then we get 3 days off.
Yeah,
if he has
I
4 days
encourage
off,
it.
we get...
So as a homeschool dad, in the reading, writing, arithmetic, that's important, I guess. I enjoy taking my children and teaching them other things. What was it, Mark Twain? No, who said it? I don't let schooling get in the way of my education. Yeah, Mark Twain. I don't let schooling get in the way of my education. So yes, we do all the schooling. I'm not saying that. But there's a lot more opportunities to teach your children other things that you can't get when they're in school. Like Jesse, who will speak in a little bit, we both like to build things. We both like to do carpentry and construction and furniture making and stuff like that. And I teach these skills to my boys. The worms. We were out in the garden the other day teaching them gardening. And yes, they did bring her big old green worms, about this big. 4 of them.
To my kitchen table.
To the kitchen. I told them to. So, but there's those experiences that they get that are hard to get without homeschooling. So in that sense, I do encourage playing hooky. No, it's not time to do school right now. Let's go do something. Let's go outside.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Well, I think that's about all the time that we have for this right now. But I just want to thank you all for being a part and willing to share your own experiences homeschooling, and hopefully that will help parents out there wondering a little bit more about homeschooling and give them a different general idea. So with that being said, you guys are free to go.
Thanks, Bethany.
And thank you. And and now we're going to hear from my husband, who didn't know exactly what he was getting into when we went on our first couple of dates, and I started talking to him about homeschooling already. But here he is, and he has become one of, I think, the biggest champions of homeschooling that I have met over the past few years. So here he is to share a little bit more.
I've never felt least qualified for a conversation than I do today. I am product of the public school, a local public school, if you know what I'm saying. When I first heard of homeschooling, I was familiar with a couple of different families that did it, and it was typical denim, skirts down to here, and some hippy dippy baloney kind of stuff that, like a lot of public school students would. I labeled them as a bunch of nerds, and I've yet to be proven wrong. I'm just kidding. Anyway, I came into this whole thing with some preconceived notions of what it was when my wife first. We were just getting to know each other. She says, "Are you ready for marriage, missions, and homeschooling?" It took me a little while for me to answer all of that, but it's been a really awesome experience in that it taught me just to break out of that bubble. I knew how to do certain things, and I knew how I was taught to do certain things, and I just could not even imagine working outside of that realm. And so when we started talking about having kids, she was an elementary school teacher. We had not had our first child yet, and so even imagining her leaving her job and us becoming just a single family income, I just could not fathom that. I'm like, how is that going to work out? At that point, I hadn't gotten my bachelor's degree. I was still doing 2-3 jobs, whatever popped up. I was doing Starbucks, youth ministry, and working construction all at the same time, and then decided go back to school, and all of this as we were starting a family. So it was just kind of crazy, overwhelming, but once we got launched into it, saw the benefits of hanging out with my kids, just whenever my schedule allowed it, they were available, they were around, and I could help out or just spend time with them. And with my construction, I would bring some of my work home, do stuff at the house. They'd come out and they'd play in the sand, and I'd break out my tools and bring out my air compressor and blow them off, and just creative ways of hanging out with my kids. And I don't do a lot of the work when it comes to homeschooling. When you think of the title of my thing, my spiel here is not just a principle. There's like a kind of a joke around homeschooling, like parents, the dads are the principal or the superintendent, or a little bit disconnected from the everyday work, which there's a whole lot of truth to that in our case. But not completely removed from the situation. I get opportunity to spend time with my kids. I get opportunity to learn from them, because there's a lot of lessons that, as a parent, I was talking to someone not too long ago that when we had our oldest child, I spent the first month after we met him just calling my parents and apologizing every day because of the type of son that I was. But it gives you insight, right, into not just parenting, but also, we got to go there. I'm a pastor. God's love for us and his patience and his mercy extended to us, right? The grace that he extends to us, like providing a way to reconcile. And so when we look at our own kids, there's lessons that are being learned all the time. So why homeschool? Hopefully your decisions don't lie on my speech. Hopefully we had lots of experience with the panels and everybody else that came, because you're depending, again, on a public school upbringing. If you depend on making your decision based upon my opinion. But I think it's invaluable. The many things that you gain, the many treasures, the memories the learning process, the maturity that comes along with that. And then the maturity in your own kids, that you see them grow. And so there's a definition that I ran into while kind of prepping for this. And there's the definition about homeschooling is, it's a refined, personalized, highly tuned education. Which, absolutely, right? You get to know, if you have multiple kids, how each one is an individual, and how the Lord has worked out something beautiful, something creative in each one of them. And they work differently, and there's different aspects about, their interest and different passions. And you start to discover those things. Diego loves to read and write, and he helps up there. Eliana, she loves dancing. She likes to cook. Sometimes if we're taking too long and making breakfast, she's like, I'm going to go make some breakfast, and I'm going to make some coffee. Knows how to run our little barista thing at home, and make sure the rest of the kids are in line. Like, if we're not around, she's got things covered, And Cruz just is gifted in understanding how things work. Loves to tear things down and put them back together. He broke a measuring tape the other day, and we're like, dude, why did you do that? Oh, I just wanted to see how it worked. All right, well, then let's put it back together. And so we put it back together because he knows how it works now. Rio, we're figuring that out. She's our youngest, but absolutely just beautiful and awesome and adventurous, and you get to participate in the tent making when there's days when the tents take over like the whole living room, and if you're a little smaller than me, you can crawl through all those spaces, but we learn from each other. We get to spend time together, have memories. That's what the family nucleus is all about. So before anybody got up here, in my notes, I have Proverbs 22, 5, and 6. And it says, and I'm using the CSB because it's just, the readability is so much easier. Again, public school. I need all the help that I can get. I'm not tearing down the public schools, just joking. That's what we do. There are thorns and snares on the way of the crooked. The one who guards himself stays far from them. Start a youth out on his way. Even when he grows old, he will not depart from it. So we have a mission to prepare these little lives into mature people, adults out into the world, that they may be a positive influence and point people to Christ. That's our mission. And if you take it all, then it might be a little overwhelming, but we're not doing it all on our own. It's the Lord leading us and guiding us through this process of preparing them like arrows to send them out into the world. And the Lord is so gracious, so awesome, that he gives us these nuggets of just treasures that it shows up in their life, and they're like, well, that can't be me, when they write their first novel, right, or do things that are crazy, unimaginable, so that we may not boast. The Lord gets all the credit, and absolutely, he knows them, and as we listen and obey and direct and be a help to them, you just see all kinds of awesome fruit just taking off, and it's so awesome and so rewarding. So the reason for homeschooling can vary so much. People can, and it doesn't have to be necessarily a religious thing. There's people that are in the military that, because of their structure or their schedules or their moving here and there, that's a good tool. For a lot of us as Christians, we want to be the main influence in our kids' lives. We can have just a quick look at the news and see both extremes of the arguments that are going on in society and say, ooh, that's jacked up. I don't want that for my kids, right? And so we bring them up in the Lord, which it will look weird for secular, the secular world, but to be preparing kids to function in the environment that we see all around us, that's our mission, is for them to be equipped, with the love of the Lord, so they may be patient with the attacks that come on a regular basis, and they will. We started our mission or our adventure because we looked, even so many years back, looked at what was happening in the world around us and like, yeah, it's a little crazy. And so it took some convincing. Well, there's nothing wrong with sending the kids to public school. But the more that we examine, like being the main influencers in their lives was primary, and it was important. And so that's what sent us, on that adventure. But there can be a variety of reasons of why one would do it. And there's lots of criticism, right? We can say, oh, they're going to be awkward and weird. Well, maybe, but there's awkward and weird all over the place, right? So we talk about socialization. I remember being in public school and moving through the masses, and you do make a few good friends, and you say, from across the hall, and then you go to a room and you're supposed to sit and be quiet. Some of us disobeyed. We're like fooling around in the back. But and then you might get a chance in PE. Do they still have PE? I don't know. So you might have a chance to do some PE hanging out. We used to have shop. I don't know if they have shop anymore. So there was some periods of being able to hang out, but you're just moving through the masses like everybody else is. And real life, when you break out of public school, doesn't look like being in that big old group of people, right? You establish a few good friends. Our kids do a lot more socializing and a lot more activity that I'm prepared to do most days. We go dance, taekwondo, and co-op, and all of this stuff. And they get plenty. We say no to stuff, right? They're like, let me see. Nope, not doing that one. But we do encourage, to a certain amount, to allow them to go and hang out. And they've got good friends. I think friends for a lifetime, because of, being on this adventure that with other homeschoolers, right? And so that aspect of being able to relate to someone else, being able to live in the same world as someone else, well, first of all, they're living at home with each other, right? So they're going to deal with difficult people. Just saying, right? And then aside, that equips them to be able to deal with the hardness in real life when you go out into the real world. And not just getting along and putting up with, but there's a whole lifetime of you have to make peace because you're in the same household for those number of years. So there's some longevity, there's some stamina that is established, through. So we encourage you to have lots of kids, so that the trials will just mature the kids even more. You're on that. Homeschool is not for everyone? Well, yeah, maybe. I've seen it done badly. But I don't know who, I think it was Christy. We were talking right before she left and talking about, we go to the hospital and deliver our first babies, and they just trust you to take these babies home, right? No instructions, no, here is how they get their license or how they're going to, there's books. But you don't have to be like certified. They just release babies to you at the hospital, right? we can take care of this education thing. A good majority of the people that have some sense, that have, like, believe me, there are some that are not equipped. A good majority of the people can. And do a good job of it. You have to be intentional and diligent and stay on top of it. We're going to slack. There's days that we don't school at all. I'm just telling on us. Like, no. It's been this week might be, that we might have a couple of days where we're not doing anything because it's been a couple long weeks. But I lost my train of thought. I don't know where I was going with that. But anyway, there is freedom in making those choices. There is that opportunity to be the major influencers in their life. Okay, so some criticisms. They won't have friends. You have to, again, be intentional, and they will have plenty of socialization. They're going to think we're weird. Well, perhaps. I thought it was like the hippie life, man. I didn't understand. It was new to me, and sometimes it still is. But anyway, there's normal, great people that are practicing homeschooling and doing a great job of it. Oh, we'll need our own separate quarters, right? Yeah, maybe. We tried that, right, at our first house, and it invaded the rest of the house, and it's okay. It's all right. It doesn't have to. It can if that's absolutely what you need to do, then you do whatever works for you. But it will eventually invade the rest of your house. Not qualified. If you feel a conviction to do it, I say pray about it. Talk it over with your spouse, but I think you could absolutely be qualified to do it. It will be a lot of work. Yes, life is a lot of work. Again, we're training these young people to be adults and send them out, so it'll be work. People will think, okay, cover the weirdness. So here's some things. Again, I don't feel like, so when you talk about being a homeschool dad, I think of, I don't know, someone that is a lot more involved than me. I am involved. I'm not disconnected, and yet, I don't know, maybe that's what a homeschool dad is. I'm figuring it out. But being available, being present, helping out, all of those things contribute, to the training of these young lives. So just some pointers on what you can do to be more involved. I love seeing my wife teach. I love Bethany and love how so we met out in the field. We were doing missions in Mexico. And we would go, I was building stuff and leading construction, translating, and she was coordinating youth groups coming down and helping out with all that mess that we had down there. But we would go and do VBS at our host church, and then we would go to orphanages. And from early on, I just fell in love with her and with her passion for teaching, and I'm going to get some free Starbucks after this whole thing is done. And just the way that she taught, absolutely, like, just loving on kids. And that has translated over to our family. I love sitting there at the table and listening, to the duck that didn't learn the lesson and got on the boat last. I don't remember the name of the story. That gets spanked. I can't remember the name. Diego might remember. Anyway, so like going through all these little stories, right? And in our transition from coming from Kansas to here, we spent some time in Oklahoma, and I was replumbing a house. And as we went from Kansas to Oklahoma, Oklahoma to here and back, and doing this work, transitioning, trying to make, we were going through, this isn't a Christian series at all, but a series of unfortunate events, right? And it was part of our journey. It was part of, there's some great memories of just traveling together, talking about their favorite characters and the craziness that they've kept, falling into. And there's some just awesome and beautiful memories that we established and just doing life together. We had a discussion about moving from Kansas to possibly taking a pastoral job here in Del Rio. And it was a family, meeting, getting together. Their vote didn't count as much as her and I, but we had a family discussion, right? They were all involved. And, but it was, again, doing life together. But I love to see her teach, and I love just, participating on that level, just even being attending a class or a lesson. So your presence, as a dad, it means a lot. In that, even if you don't say a word, which you should get involved. You're backing your partner's play, right? And it really impacts your kids. And I told them early on, and I stole this from a comedian. I brought you into this world. I'm going to take you out. You do what your mama says, and she's going to tell you what to do as far as school is concerned. If I hear any iron and lip from you, man, I'm going to watch out. All right, getting distracted. So sitting in on lessons, support with your presence. Let her decompress. Occasionally, you do have to go to Starbucks and just say, kids, don't tear up the house. We have to go and just let her vent, and everything's going to be okay. Or maybe not even that. Sometimes you just receive. Don't solve the problem. Just take it. More coffee? Okay. All right. So those times are precious, and they're very important. Just to even, at the beginning of the year, right, we go through our calendar. This is what it's going to look like. Planning together. I don't typically execute the plan, but we at least plan together. Attending homeschool conferences. Again, that was for me, when I first heard, and she's like, hey, you're going to come with me on this one. My nerd alert went off, and sometimes it's still true, but not as true as it used to be. But no, there's some great treasures, some great resources, some really supportive people that just want to encourage you on your journey. One that we went to recently that I just loved, and it's going to stay with me for a long time. Again, because we figured out Diego's passion, our oldest. We ended up going to a writing seminar together. I don't write. I mean, I do write, but it's for school, or it's something that I have to do. It's not like a pleasure necessarily, but he does, and so we went to a writing seminar with some great writers. Andrew Peterson was the main guy, and he's got lots of great adventure books. And so being able to sit in and have my son encouraged in his craft, and just being present and hearing, from him and his passion, it was just a beautiful experience. So attend the conferences as much as there's so many resources. And then you may have to travel a little bit, but there's just great opportunity, both in curriculum and discounts and curriculum, people that are experienced, just some great experiences there. On occasion, grade some schoolwork. It makes that connection with even further with your kids. I did with mine on reading, right? When we go and we mark off what's right, what's wrong, and go do it again, and those are just because part of it is whatever it is that they're reading and writing. Now they're learning facts and different things throughout history and they ask questions like, "Were you alive when the automobile was made?" No, I wasn't. I'm not that old. Come on. So you like kind of work through that stuff together, and it's supportive. Again, part of the helping out, part of the lifting that burden. Reading and discussing books. Again, adventure books, one of Diego's things, and then we're finding out that the rest of the kids are into adventure and journey and all that kind of stuff. But you have to be diligent. You have to be intentional. It can't be, and we don't get it right all the time. Sometimes there's some passiveness or some disconnection, but like in our walk, when we fail, we straighten up and correct whatever we've slacked on. You have just a few years, and as the major influencers in your kids' lives, and as we're thinking about what our mission is as parents, treasure every moment. And as homeschoolers, you get more moments. And so just going back to Proverbs, and we've heard it a few different times. Start a youth out in his way. Even when he grows old, he will not depart from it. Now, it's not a formula, but it is from one of the wisdom books. We do our part, right? We are diligent, we're intentional, we do our part, and we pray that the Lord will do a mighty work in each one of our kids. That's our hope, and we rely heavily on the Lord for strength, for instruction, for direction. But it's also within this system, it's supportive of the uniquely and wonderfully made part of, your kid. He knows us individually, knows how many hairs are on our head, and each day some of us have even less, right? The gifting, the awesome things that the Lord is developing in each one of them. And within this system, again, I'm not knocking the public school system, and you probably won't hear it often, but coming from a pastor, there's a Pink Floyd song. Those were other days, okay? It's not today. Just another brick in the wall, right? We get another opportunity to help develop those kids in that uniqueness, in that way that the Lord has made them wonderful, and not just, again, another brick in the wall. So that's all I've got today. I am grateful for the opportunity. We, again, saw the cry. We saw a need, and we hope that this has been useful. And if we can be of any more assistance, of any more help, I'll give you Bethany's number, and she will answer any questions that you have.
I'm going to have you stay so you can pray for us
Okay.
in just a second. But There are a couple of things that I wanted to say before we end today, especially for those of you who are viewing online. First of all, we want you to share this video with others who aren't able to come. If you have somebody that you know is toying with the idea of homeschooling or is definitely going to be homeschooling this next year, we want to make this information available for all of them. The second thing is that we have a lot of different homeschool curriculum magazine packages that we are happy to give out to you. So if you weren't able to come today, but you're in the Del Rio area and you want to swing by the church, we're open Monday through Friday from 9 to 3 typically, and our address is 301 Avenue G here in Del Rio. If you are out of the Del Rio area and you would still like to get that homeschool curriculum package, if you would call our office and we will be happy to send one to you. Our phone number is 830-774-1801. And beyond that, and this is something that we're so excited to offer, so Esperanza First for the past year has been hosting our homeschool co-op, and unfortunately our co-op is not going to be able to function this next fall or this fall as we start up just because of the numbers and some other issues with COVID-19. We hadn't been able to figure out a way to make co-op happen. So we're hoping still that to start again in the spring. And so if you're in the Del Rio area and you are interested in doing co-op in the spring, you should look on Facebook for Del Rio Homeschool Group, and you can get information about that. But in the meantime, and this is really important for people who are here today, but also for the community as well, we are going to be offering at Esperanza First some different homeschool enrichment classes. It's different than co-op in the fact that it's not something that you have to stay, and it's just one class period at a time. They're scattered throughout the week. It's not like a whole 3 or 4 hour section chunk at once. So you can look at those class options and sign up your kids for those. They are very limited because of the number of classes we're able to provide this season, since it's something new to us that we've never provided before. But we wanted to reach out to the new homeschooling community, especially because we want you to be able to connect with other families who are also homeschooling. It is not a journey that you want to take alone. It is very important to have community. And so we want you to contact the office if you're interested in any of that. We're going to get that up on the website page probably Monday morning, so you can look at what curriculum or classroom options we have available. And we encourage you to sign your kids up for those. We'll have social distancing and have some other practices to keep your kids safe and healthy during that time, but we want you to seriously consider getting your kids into those classes, part of that socialization that happens. You can't be stuck at home all the time. That's not fun for anyone. So with all that being said, we thank you so much once again for joining us and bringing your families to today, and then also just thank you again if you're watching online. So, and with that, we'll just pray and we'll end. Thank you.
Father God, we thank you. Thank you for the awesome opportunity that it is to be a part of your family, and to be here today to encourage, to equip, to even consider this alternative and this other option. Father, help us to make right decisions. I pray for each family, for each parent, as they look to their future and consider these things that you've instructed us to do. What is the best way that we can do that? And if there's any anxiety or any nervousness over that, Father, that you would bring comfort and encouragement to them, so that we may know and be reminded that you're in control. You are our provider. You care for us individually. There is nothing that escapes you. Lord, so we thank you. We can depend upon you. You are faithful, the same yesterday, today, and forever. We love you, Lord. We thank you. Thank you for this day. And we pray these things in Christ's name. Amen. Thank you, everyone.
What fortune lies beyond the stars? Those dazzling heights too fast to